The Fox Who Earned Her Soul. The story of Wolhwa. Korea, a land of mountains older than memory, of spirits that have watched from the peaks since before the first village was built below. The people of old Korea knew that the mountains were never empty. They built shrines at the passes. They left offerings at the roots of ancient trees. They whispered prayers before crossing into the deep forest after dark, because they knew something lived there, something beautiful, something dangerous, something that had been watching them for a very, very long time. Prologue. Do not enter the Mountain 1. The Missing Traveler. This is the story of Joseon, one of Korea's most sacred mountains, a place of ancient forests and hidden valleys, where the mist never fully clears and the silence has a weight to it that presses against your chest. The year is 1692, the 18th year of King Seokjong's reign, and in the villages at the foot of this mountain, people had begun to disappear. It began with a traveler, a merchant, crossing the mountain pass alone. He had made the crossing a dozen times before. He knew the path. He carried a lantern. He had no reason to be afraid. He did not return. At first, the villagers assumed he had lost his way. Joseon is vast and unforgiving. Even seasoned travelers have been swallowed by its fog and ravines. But 3 days passed, then a week, and on the 15th morning, a woodcutter found him. He was lying in a deep ravine, far from any path. His face was peaceful, almost serene, as though he had fallen asleep mid-dream. No wounds, no signs of struggle, not a single mark on his body. The woodcutter stepped closer, and then he stepped back. The man's liver was gone, removed without a cut, without a wound, as though it had simply never been there at all. This was the beginning. 2. Seola. High in the mountains, far above the villages, something watched the valley below. Her name was Seola, 1,200 years old, the oldest of 3 fox spirits who had made these mountains their home since before the kingdom had a name. She was beautiful in the way that ancient things sometimes are. Not soft, not gentle, but precise. Every feature carved by centuries into something beyond human proportion. White hair that moved in the mountain wind. Eyes that caught the moonlight and gave it back as gold. She had not always been like this. 700 years ago, Seola had believed in a human being. Only once. Only one. She remembered the night she learned what that belief was worth. The torches, the arrows, the way he turned his face away. Since that night, Seola had not made the same mistake. 3. Danhee at the market. The youngest of the 3 sisters was nothing like Seola. Her name was Danhee, 500 years old, 6 tails, and an appetite, not only for prey, but for everything beautiful that the human world had to offer. When Danhee came to the market, she wore the face of a young woman so lovely it stopped conversation mid-sentence. Men forgot what they were doing. Merchants forgot their customers. Even the children paused their games to stare. She sold a luminous white bead, pulled impossibly from her own mouth, and used the coins to browse the market stalls. Silver hairpins, silk ribbons, colorful norige ornaments. She examined each one with genuine delight. This was the most human thing about Danhee, her joy in beautiful, useless things. But then her eyes caught something else. A man walking alone toward the mountain road. Nobody was watching him. He was unremarkable in every way, except for his scent. Danhee set down the hairpin she was holding, slowly, regretfully, and began to walk toward him. This is the terrifying thing about Danhee. There was no malice in it, no cruelty. She simply moved the way a tide moves, without anger, without hesitation, because that is what tides do. One smile, that was all it took. The man's eyes lost their focus. His feet began to move without his permission, following her, into the trees, into the dark. He did not come back. 4. Fear comes to the village. Fear has a particular texture when it settles into a village. It begins as rumor, whispered at the well in the morning, passed between women wringing laundry at the stream, muttered by men sharing wine at the roadside inn after dark. Another one gone, found with no liver, no wound, just gone. By the time summer arrived, the villages at the foot of Joseon had drawn into themselves like fists. Doors were barred at dusk. Paper talismans were pasted on every doorframe. Children were called inside before the shadows lengthened. Nobody traveled the mountain passes alone. And at night, from somewhere deep in the mountain, a sound. Thin, long, almost human. A fox, crying in the dark. At the roadside inn, the innkeeper warned every traveler who stopped to eat. Do not go into those mountains alone. Do not follow a beautiful woman if she appears on the path after dark. Do not let the sound of music draw you from the road. A Gumiho is hunting in Joseon, a 9-tailed fox spirit, and she does not leave footprints. 5. The cottage light. And yet, deep in the mountain, far beyond any human path, there was a small cottage. A single oil lamp burned in the window, warm amber against the cold, dark forest. A woman lived there alone. Nobody knew where she had come from. Nobody knew how long she had been there. She came to the village market sometimes, selling herbs, buying rice. Quiet, polite, beautiful in a way that made people uncomfortable without knowing why. Her name was Wolhwa, and every night, without fail, she stood at that window and watched the village lights below. She had been watching them for 1,000 years. Wolhwa was a Gumiho, a 9-tailed fox spirit, ancient beyond reckoning, but she was not like her sisters. Long ago, so long ago she could not name the exact year, something had changed in her. She had looked down at those village lights and felt something she had no name for, a longing, not for their livers, not for their fear, for their lives. She wanted to be inside that warmth, to eat at those low tables, to sleep under those thatched roofs, to wake in the morning and hear the millstone turning and the children calling to each other in the alleys. She wanted to be human, and so she had stopped hunting. Long ago, she had stopped. She survived on the livers of mountain animals, boar, deer, the occasional wolf. It was never enough. The hunger was always there, gnawing at the edges of her, especially when the full moon rose. But she endured it, because there was a way. Korean folklore holds that a fox spirit can become human by living beside a man for 100 days. 100 days in which he comes to love her of his own true will, with no enchantment, no coercion, no deception. Wolhwa had tried twice. The first time, she had failed on the 81st day. The second time, the 99th. 1 day short. She did not let herself think about what she would do if she failed again. And so that night, as she watched the village lights below, she did not know that her third chance was already walking toward her. A young scholar, exhausted, hunted, walking the mountain pass alone in the dark, his eyes still burning with something that had not yet been extinguished. Chapter 1. The Village of Hwarim. 1. The village. The village at the foot of Joseon was called Hwarim, the village of flowers and forest. In spring, the mountain slopes bloomed with azaleas and wild plum, and the name made perfect sense. But this was summer. The mountain was deep green and heavy with heat, and the name felt like something from a gentler time. Life in Hwarim moved to old rhythms. Women gathered at the well each morning to draw water and share news. Every village had a well like this, the original social media, where everything that happened overnight was processed and distributed before the sun had fully cleared the ridge. Children played jegichagi in the alleys, a traditional Korean game where you kick a small weighted disc and keep it airborne as long as possible. Koreans have been playing this game for over 1,000 years. At the grain mill, women turned the millstone in slow, steady circles, singing work songs that their mothers had sung and their mothers before them. It was, in many ways, a perfectly ordinary village. Except that this summer, people kept disappearing, and nobody lingered after dark. 2. Lee Junseo and Dolsoe. It was late afternoon when they arrived. 2 men on foot, a tall young scholar in travel clothes, dusty, rumpled, and clearly exhausted, though he carried himself with the quiet bearing of someone who had not yet decided to give up. Behind him, a shorter, rounder man staggering under the weight of a large bundle, wiping sweat from his face and muttering to himself.
And I heard on the road that there's a Gumiho in these mountains, a fox spirit. That eats people's livers while they sleep. Going anyway, aren't we?
Enough.
I'm just saying, Master, the people here look frightened. Have you noticed? Nobody makes eye contact. Nobody is outside who doesn't need to be.
I noticed.
I'm uncomfortable. Doesn't that count for anything?
The scholar's name was Lee Junseo, 26 years old. The other man was Dolsoe, his servant, his shadow, his most reliable source of comedy in otherwise desperate circumstances. They found the roadside inn and took a table in the courtyard.
Where are you headed, gentlemen?
Over the mountain.
Then let me be quick about it. A Gumiho is hunting in Joseon. Not alone, I hope.
Thank you for the warning.
The innkeeper, a sharp-eyed woman who had clearly seen everything and forgotten nothing, lowered her voice as she poured their drink. She told them about the disappearances, the bodies found without livers, the beautiful woman seen on the mountain paths at night, the sound of weeping that didn't belong to any human throat. Junseo looked at his bowl. He was quiet for a long time. There were things hunting him too. Things more dangerous in some ways than a fox spirit. Things that wore human faces. He had been running for 6 months. He was tired, and the mountain was the only way forward. He left a coin on the table and stood up. Dolsoe stared at his back. It wasn't a question. 3. Into the mountain. The mountain received them in silence. From the moment they left the last village building behind, the world changed. The sounds of the village, the millstone, the children, the animals, faded within minutes, replaced by something older, the creak of ancient trees, the distant sound of water, and a silence beneath all of it that felt less like an absence of sound and more like a presence. The path climbed. The trees grew older and closer together. The light thinned, and then the sky opened, and the rain came down. Not a passing shower. The full weight of the summer monsoon hitting without warning, turning the path into a river of mud in the space of a few breaths. They ran, or tried to. The path was treacherous, the footing uncertain, the rain blinding. Junseo's foot caught on a root. He went down hard. His side struck a stone. The pain was immediate and absolute. He tried to rise. His legs did not cooperate. 6 months of running. 6 months of hunger and cold and fear. 6 months of the body being asked to do more than it could give. The body had finally submitted its bill. The rain fell on his face. He heard Dolsoe calling his name. farther away than it should have been,
Master!
the voice already muffled by the storm. The darkness came up to meet him. Chapter 2. The Man in the Rain. 1. What she found. Wolhwa heard it through the sound of the rain, a sound that had no business being on this mountain, in this weather, at this hour. A human voice, faint, fading. She sat very still under the cottage eaves and listened to the rain, and told herself it was none of her concern. The voice came again. Weaker this time, she told herself again, and then she picked up the lantern and walked into the rain. She found him around the bend in the lower path. A young man, face down in the mud, breathing. She could tell that much, but barely. She stood over him with her lantern and looked at him for a long moment. He smelled like a human being. Blood and rain and exhaustion, and something else beneath it all. Something warm and alive that her oldest instincts recognized and named with cold precision as prey. She was aware of the hunger. She was always aware of the hunger. On a night like this, with the moon hidden behind clouds and no one for miles, it would have been so easy. She looked at his face, young, pale, dark circles beneath his closed eyes. The face of someone who had not slept properly in a very long time, who had been carrying something heavy for longer than their body could sustain. She knew that look. She had seen it in the mirror of still mountain water for 1,000 years. She put down the lantern, and she lifted him, not the way a human woman would lift a man, struggling, awkward, step by labored step, the way a mountain lifts a tree, effortlessly, as though he weighed nothing at all. She carried him up through the rain to her cottage, and she did not ask herself why. 2. Dolsoe.
Master!
Meanwhile, Dolsoe was having the worst night of his life.
Answer me!
He had slipped on the wet path a moment after Junseo fell, sliding down a short embankment and losing his lantern in the process. By the time he had scrambled back up, his master was gone. He searched. He called out. He stumbled through the rain in every direction until he had no idea where he was or which way was down. And then, in the darkness, he remembered. The innkeeper's warning. Beautiful women on the mountain paths at night. Dolsoe sat down in the rain and made a sound that was not quite a word. He did not find the village until morning. It took him 3 more days to find someone who knew where the cottage was. 3 days later. He woke to the smell of medicinal herbs and a ceiling he did not recognize. Low and dark, earthen, bundles of dried plants hanging from the rafters in dense, aromatic clusters. He tried to sit up. His side explained, at length and with feeling, why that was a mistake. A woman was standing over him, holding a ceramic bowl. Young, or seeming young, very still. Beautiful in a way that didn't announce itself, but simply existed, the way a mountain is beautiful. Not asking for your attention, but having it anyway. He looked at the bowl. He drank it. The bitterness was extraordinary. Something very close to a smile moved across her face. Gone before he could be certain he'd seen it.
That is remarkably unpleasant.
The more unpleasant, the better it works.
Where am I?
My cottage. You were on the path 3 days ago.
3 days.
He looked around the room. A small rice container. A few simple tools. A single oil lamp. No evidence of anyone else who had ever been here. Later, when he was strong enough to sit on the porch, he watched the mountain and she sat beside him, sorting herbs with practiced hands. He told her about the snow.
I was here once before, years ago. I was 10 years old. I got lost in a snowstorm. It was winter, and the snow was very deep, and I was crying because I didn't know which way to go. A white fox appeared. It didn't make a sound. It just walked ahead of me, and I followed it, and it led me back to where I could see the village. And then it was gone. Your eyes remind me of that fox.
She looked away. She went back to sorting herbs, and that was all. But something had passed between them that neither one named. Something old. Something that felt, despite everything, like a beginning. That night, after he was asleep, Wolhwa opened a small, worn box. Inside was a calendar, handmade, precise, with 100 spaces. She dipped her brush and marked the first day. 1. 99 to go. End of episode 1. Episode 2, coming soon.